listener production.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing. Katrina Blowers here with you. One of the major challenges for people who suffer from anxiety, depression or schizophrenia is managing their medication. Many of the drugs they're prescribed come with crippling side effects like weight gain and mood swings.
10% of the population are taking one or a cocktail of, say, antidepressants or antipsychotics. And so people are really impacted by this, and what it ultimately leads to is if you're taking medication for your mental health and then that medication makes you put on weight, that's not going to be great for your mental health. So it creates this cascading problem of issues.
Yeah, but what if scientists came up with a medication that didn't make you put on weight? Well, scientists in South Australia reckon they have, and we are chatting with one of them in the second half of this episode of The Briefing. That's after the headlines. First, here is today's news with Betsy and Siebert. It is Monday, the 3rd of June.
Morning, Katrina. A body has been found overnight after a townhouse exploded in Western Sydney on Saturday. 5 other people have been hospitalised. A local resident told the ABC that they'd complained about a smell of gas before the explosion.
My next door neighbour, he called the gas company and the gas company said no, there was no leak or anything, but we could smell gas for the last 2 weeks.
The official cause of the blast hasn't been confirmed. It's being reported that the victim was a trainee nurse who was visiting her mother when the explosion happened. An awful story.
Members of Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu's far-right coalition partners have threatened to resign if Israel moves forward with a new ceasefire plan for Gaza. US President Joe Biden took the unusual step over the weekend of announcing a detailed 3-phase plan to end the war, which he said was Israel's own proposal in the negotiations with Hamas. But Israel's finance minister and the national security minister both opposed any deal that came before the total destruction of Hamas. Let's take a listen to Biden describing the situation.
Now, after intensive diplomacy carried out by my team, my many conversations with leaders of Israel, Qatar, and Egypt, and other Middle Eastern countries, Israel has offered a comprehensive new proposal. It's a roadmap to an enduring ceasefire and the release of all hostages.
So that proposal involves Israeli hostages being released, Palestinian prisoners being released, and a withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza. Then the temporary ceasefire would turn into a permanent ceasefire, and then an internationally backed effort would be there to rebuild Gaza's destroyed buildings and infrastructure. Now, Hamas welcomed the president's announcement, but Netanyahu responded over the weekend saying that Israel wants the complete destruction of Hamas before it will agree to ending the war. But there is lots of pressure on Netanyahu in a few different directions at the moment. And of course, all of this is in the background of these more than 36,000 Palestinians and 1,200 Israelis who've been killed in the war. And it feels like a significant turning point because far-right members of Netanyahu's coalition, as you mentioned, are threatening to take down his government if he takes this deal. But centrist members of his government have also threatened to take down his government by June the 8th, which is this week, if Netanyahu fails to propose a comprehensive plan to get the hostages released and do something about the situation in Gaza. And all of this comes after we saw that incredibly traumatic footage last week of the results of the airstrike in southern Gaza. And there's also been the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court making moves here. And we did an episode explaining what international law can do about the horrors that have been occurring in Gaza. And that's in your briefing feed.
Mexico is likely to elect its first female president, with frontrunners Claudia Sheinbaum and her main rival Xochitl Galvez both far ahead in the polls. Ms. Sheinbaum is a 61-year-old scientist who served as mayor of Mexico City from 2018 to 2023 and has the backing of the outgoing president Andrés Manuel López Obrador. And Ms. Galvez, also 61, is a senator and businesswoman who was chosen by a broad coalition of parties who want to put an end to the rule of the Morena party. The election and campaign has been overshadowed by violent attacks on government. That's resulted in over 20 local candidates being killed across Mexico. There are some private surveys quoting up to 37 people have been killed. We will know soon. Polls will close later today, and the winning candidate will take office at the end of September. Benzian, I know that Mexico has a lot going on with violence, as we just heard, and drug cartels. But, you know, at least in this instance, it's quite progressive, because even though women in Mexico didn't get the right to vote until 1953, which is a full 33 years after women in the US, the country is almost sure to have its first female leader before the US does, because Mexican law requires political parties to put equal numbers of men and women up for election. Also, just a side note, also in opposition to what's been happening in the US, Mexico's Supreme Court elected its first female Chief Justice at the start of last year, and her court decriminalised abortion in Mexico.
And media mogul Rupert Murdoch, at the age of 93, has married for the fifth time over the weekend to retired 67-year-old molecular biologist Alina Zhukova. The pair had a ceremony at his vineyard in California. They reportedly first met through Rupert's third ex-wife, Wendy Deng, to whom he was married for 14 years. Murdoch had been engaged for 2 weeks to 67-year-old conservative radio host Anne Leslie Smith last year, before he reportedly started dating Zhukova. Murdoch stepped down as the chair of Fox and News Corp last year, following a 7-decade career helming his media empire.
Wonder if this is a guy who just loves to be in love, or just can't be on his own to be with someone, his current wife, only, you know, a couple of months after breaking off his former engagement, and also to be married for 5 times. You'd have to hope that the prenup would be pretty tight. Or maybe he just has no money left after giving it all to his ex-wives. Benzian, I also looked at his track record of how he ends these relationships, and certainly with his last marriage to Jerry Hall, he sent her an email. She was waiting for him in their house. She didn't really think there was anything wrong. She was waiting for him to arrive, and she received an email from him saying, sorry, need to move on. I've got lots that I want to achieve in my life, and clearly it doesn't include you. So pretty brutal.
Kind regards, Rupert.
All right. Thank you for joining us, Benzian. We are about to get into a really interesting briefing topic about antipsychotic medication that won't make you gain weight. For many Australians who suffer from schizophrenia, anxiety or depression, managing the side effects of their meds is a daily challenge. They battle weight gain and mood swings, and that growing frustration can lead to many discarding their medication, leaving them exposed and vulnerable to other vagaries of their illnesses. Well, new Australian research could change all of that. Researchers at the Uni of South Australia have developed what is a new coating for antipsychotic drugs that can reduce weight gain. That's great news. And also help the body absorb the medication much more effectively. This research team is headed up by Dr. Paul Joyce, and Dr. Joyce is with us now. Thank you so much for joining us on the briefing. This could be huge for so many people who take this medication. I've had friends who've even gone off their medication because the weight gain that has been associated with being on these kinds of drugs has made them feel so much worse about themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a rather big issue that we're facing in the terms of most mental health medications have the unwanted side effect of weight gain. And so the issue is quite significant because 10% of the population are taking, you know, one or a cocktail of, say, antidepressants or antipsychotics. And so people are really impacted by this. And what it ultimately leads to is, you know, if you're taking medication for your mental health, and then that medication makes you put on weight, that's not going to be great for your mental health. So it creates this cascading problem of issues.
Do we know why some of these drugs have that side effect?
Yeah, we do. And then one of the main reasons is the way in which these drugs interact with the gut microbiome. So the gut microbiome are these bugs and bacteria that naturally live within our guts. And we now know that the gut microbiome is responsible for regulating a lot of our metabolic health, but also, other aspects like our mental health. And so these drugs act like antibiotics where they disrupt the gut microbiome and kill some of the bacteria that naturally reside in our gut. And that leads to unwanted metabolic side effects, one being weight gain. Others include things like hyperglycemia, so people are more prone to getting diabetes or become pre-diabetic when they're on these medications. So, yeah, the issues are quite significant.
Yeah, and I know that they say that, when they go through that list of possible side effects, they say, look, this could be a possible side effect, but do we know why it has that impact on some people and not others?
Yeah, so I think it is the way in which their guts behave to these drugs. Some of it comes down to genetics. So with all drugs and adverse effects, that can be a genetic thing. But yeah, there is a huge education problem here in terms of when I talk to patients that have had this experience, they're like, well, I never knew I was going to put on weight. If I knew that, I probably wouldn't have taken these medications because I would have preferred some other kind of therapy to try help with my mental health. So there needs to be better education around this, definitely.
Do you know, is there an average weight gain that people experience?
It definitely depends on the drug. So as I said, a lot of people take a cocktail of drugs to try help with their mental health issues. For a common antipsychotic known as olanzapine, the weight gain within the first 3 months of taking it is around 10% of someone's body weight. So someone like me who, I'm pushing 100 kilos, if I take that drug, I'm going to put on up to 10 kilos within the first couple of months. So a really significant amount.
And we've talked about the mental cost of that, but there's also other medical issues that could arise as a result of putting on that amount of weight.
Yeah, exactly. And so you end up with a lot of people that are taking mental health medications being obese or, definitely overweight. And we all know what the implications of obesity are for overall general health.
All right, tell us about your research now, and you've discovered a possible solution to all of this.
Yeah, so our research is focused on not necessarily coming up with new medications or new drugs. The drugs work, it's just they have these unwanted side effects. So we're trying to remove these side effects by essentially reformulating them within tiny particles that interact with the gut microbiome and prevent the way in which these drugs negatively interfere with the microbiome. And so what we've shown in preclinical studies is that when we administer these drugs with these new formulations, that we actually remove that weight gain effect and we positively influence the gut microbiome. So not only will it lead to reducing the weight gain, but also the other costly side effects that come with it.
So my understanding in the way that this works is you've created a new coating. Can you describe what that is?
Yeah, so the way in which this coating works is that you want to imagine these drugs as being tiny molecules when they get into your body. So we've encapsulated or put the drugs into these tiny particles or this coating that enables us to better deliver the drug to the blood and to where the drug needs to go. But then also the coating itself is active in the sense that it interacts with the bacteria in our guts to positively change the way in which the drugs have a action on these bacteria. That ultimately removes that negative side effect of disrupting the gut microbiome and leading to weight gain.
This will be huge for a lot of people. So far, you've focused on antipsychotic drugs, but do you think it could have broader implications for other medications? Definitely.
So the way in which we've created this new formulation is for it to be multi-purpose so that we can use it for things like antidepressants as well. As I said earlier, lots of mental health medications suffer from this common side effect. So we're hoping that we can repurpose this for also antidepressants that are commonly prescribed for people dealing with depression, but also anti-anxiety medication as well. So people that are obviously suffering from anxiety.
What stage are you at with the trials?
We've done preclinical work so far. So we've, validated it and proven our concept in a preclinical model. We're now wanting to test this in the clinic, so in real human patients. And so we're hoping to start recruiting patients within the next couple of years to start testing this and then hopefully get it approved for clinical use. I think the good thing about our approach is we're not trying to create new drugs. So that process can take 10, 15, 20 years. Our process can be much quicker because the drugs are already approved and it's we know it's safe.
Yeah, and that's going to be key to a lot of people listening is they're going to be thinking, when can I have this change on the shelves? And in terms of facilitating that change for all the different pharmaceutical companies, is it an expensive change to make?
Not nearly as expensive as creating new drugs. So I think the average cost of a new drug at the moment is $3 billion to get it to the market. For this, it's a lot more cost effective. It still takes, obviously, investment from pharmaceutical companies to enable us to do the necessary clinical testing and then obviously manufacture it. But it's a lot more cost effective than creating a new drug.
We were talking before about just my personal experience with some of my friends who've put on weight and really hated that side effect. For someone who's prescribed these drugs, and you just mentioned 10% of the population is taking some form, they then gain weight and therefore most likely stop taking those drugs. I mean, that's most often when they find themselves at risk of the impact of their mental illness.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it leads to, is it leads to a lot of patients, on their own accord, stopping their medication. For some mental health illnesses, that's not as significant, but for things like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, it puts the patient really at risk. And it means we need to have these better therapies that mitigate those side effects so that we can better regulate people's mental health.
Well, Dr. Joyce, I so appreciate you taking the time, and please keep us posted. We want to hear all the updates as you proceed with your research.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Katrina.
And that was Dr. Paul Joyce from the University of South Australia. I know a lot of you are going to be interested in this research. If you live in South Australia, you might even be able to take part in the next phase of the trial. Now, I did ask Dr. Joyce how you can get in touch with him. He's still setting up a webpage for all of this, but he said you can jump on his University of South Australia profile and email him directly. He's a very friendly guy, so if this interests you, get in touch. And that's all we have time for today. I'm Katrina Blowers. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Briefing.
Listener.